but I'm not really going to share. I shared the recordings with the people that signed up, but I'm going to redo these as kind of individual short tutorials, and then I'll post those on YouTube. I couldn't imagine anyone was going to watch a Zoom session of us doing these things. So what what I could do, someone asked last night to maybe show a couple of models. And so I went back through some old folders and found some files, and I can talk about how they're organized a little bit. And then I thought what we might do is just go through a kind of quick little project and build up some of the things that we did yesterday. And I'll show you kind of maybe quick rendering, quick line weights, and we'll bring some of those things together, and maybe we'll have a nice drawing at the end of tonight. Does that make sense? Does that work for people? So Daniel and Nicholas, you guys are new tonight. What's your experience or previous experience with Rhino? Anything?
I was on last night.
Oh, you were? Oh, that's right. That's right. Sorry. Yeah. I didn't see you though. You had your camera off. I didn't see your nice loft apartment.
Yeah, I could only wish.
And how about you, Nicholas?
I'm totally brand new to Rhino, so unfortunately I couldn't come last night. My power was off the whole time, but
you weren't the only one that lost power yesterday and today.
It's crazy storms. Yeah. But yeah, happy to be here.
Okay, so I think what we did a little bit last night was ran through the kind of interface and some kind of like basic tools and other things. We'll bring it together tonight, so it might be a little fast for you, but you may be able to keep up, and we'll see how that goes. Anusha, you weren't here last night either, right? What's you've had some exposure to Rhino before though, right?
Yeah, I know like the basics, but I want to get more into the 3D modeling and different characteristics, how to explode and like all that good stuff.
Okay, well, and this might be the start of that, and then I think there's more. We can always do more advanced things throughout the semester too. Okay, so maybe to start, let's see. I'll share my screen, and what I'll do is I brought pulled a couple models. Let's see. So here's one. And I grabbed two residential projects, actually 2 different projects for the same site, and then a competition project as well. And just to maybe show, I don't know, some of the way that I was kind of thinking and working, and we'll do this a little bit tonight too. Often I'd say the way that we might start is working off of a plan and beginning to extrude some of those things and work with them. And so in this model, and actually what I didn't bring was a nice design model or a design file, because often what I'll have is maybe if I'm looking at different iterations, I might have 20, 30 different copies of things where I'm trying different things and getting a sense for all of that stuff. Within this model, because we didn't talk too much about layers last night, this is, I would say, an early stage model. So there's default layer, there's a site layer, and usually like if someone gives me a file, often what I'll do is maybe turn, and maybe I should do this, is turn everything off, and then we can kind of turn things on systematically. And so at least, and I don't know that they're necessarily in this order, but we talked a little bit about the patch surfaces last night. And so for this project, we had probably contour lines that we started with and built up the topography for the site. And then there's an existing house. And so even in this case, probably taking a little bit of time, but you can see it's all just it's all on one layer. And there's a couple of different surfaces. probably thinking that we could add, like change the materials of these things as we go on. But even in this case, the existing house, if we were to render it, it probably just renders as one solid material, right? It's more of a kind of massing model. If we were to go inside, it's also just like, I guess there is a floor inside, but not much detail in there. And then, so in this case, floors, and probably at an early stage, what we would do with layers is probably treat them more like materials. So I could easily turn on all the floors. I could set a material for the floor. And if I were to start to render something, we'd have that, walls, interior walls, mullions for the glass. And all of these are typically just working, like the mullions would just be kind of extrusion. So I might go in the side view and draw this and then extrude it. And then I'll change my construction plane to the top view. I'll draw the locations of the mullions and I'll extrude those up until they hit the floor above. I'll inset those. And so that way, as you work on different layers, you can see different things, setting glass within that. And again, at this stage, I don't even know if, it looks like most of the materials, I don't know what'll happen if I render it. So there's not a good sense of the materials here. And often the other thing I'd say is that I told you guys to stay away from using yellow for anything because that's the selected color. And so the colors are really kind of contrasty, that just makes it easy to locate things. And so the stairs here, the stairs are modeled, just drawn, the kind of shape drawn and then extruded back in that direction. And then there was a retaining wall with a stair. And then it looks like, if I go to the top view, there's probably other, if we were drawing floor plans, what we typically do when we're drafting things is treat these as line weights almost. So as pens. So we can see there's probably the best floor plan is the one that's embedded underneath there. Some contour lines, construction lines, and some other things. So not to say that it's the best model, but it's a kind of working scale model that has all the surfaces there and kind of organized in a way that we can extract things and turn things on and turn them off. And so that's one model. I'll show you another one that's actually a little more detailed. And so this was one version of a house for a client. And then here's a different one. When we actually went to construction, we were the contractors as well. And so you can see the same existing house, but a different version of the house. There's a lot more layers here, but when we were building, we started laying in more and more information into there. So we can see almost like a construction model or a BIM model, all of the studs, all of the framing for the windows, different paneling elements within there. As we were building that stair, like being able to figure out some of the detailing and those types of things, key dimensions. And so this model started as a design model and then got more and more detailed as we went. And so even to the extent that we see here, these were the sheets of plywood. So we were probably trying to figure out how many sheets of plywood we needed to clad that surface. And that's why they run past, because we could count them even though we had to cut them. And so, yeah, even to the extent we can see in the layers, that's the 1/2-inch plywood, 2x10s, 2x12s, 2x4s. So we use this as a way to get takeoffs for the model. And the layers are an easy way to begin to organize some of that and doing this all 3-dimensionally within the model. If I probably started turning a lot of these things off, it would start to look more like the design model that we saw a second ago. But even off to the side, we can see these were the probably individual wall panels that we were framing with key dimensions on there too. So I share this just as a way to also talk about the ability of what might start as a really simple massing model, get more information, and then even be able to be used for different stages later. Any questions about that?
So last night you said that you don't usually produce construction drawings from Rhino. So if you're the contractor on this, did you then produce it in Revit or in AutoCAD, and then so you drew that out twice? Or
well, and then the other thing, I was the client as well. So the project that I showed a second ago was a client project. We got to the point of starting construction documents, and then the clients let us know that they were selling the house and moving. And so I was like, oh, really? Well, how much are you selling your house for? And so I ended up buying it knowing what we could do on the site. And so the drawings that we did were a real, like they were, I want to say 4 sheets, 18 by 24, maybe, like a super minimal set of drawings that were just enough to get a building permit. And so what we would do in that type of project was to take the Rhino model, probably cut the plans from it, and then I think we took them into AutoCAD at that stage and drew a simple set of plans. I think there were elevations, plans, a site plan, and maybe an electrical plan or something like that. And so it's, when you're the client, you don't have to do many drawings. And so that's, not a very detailed project, but you could take, in a different scenario, you could take a Rhino file and bring it into Revit and then really start to build up the set of drawings from that. There's also other things that happen too, like what can happen, or what probably does happen, is that, and every office is a little bit different in the way that they work with these, but you might have a design file and that might be in Rhino. Then you kind of finalize that and freeze that. And then you could start to take parts of it, take drawings through it, and then start to build those up. Maybe, and at that point you might make the transition from Rhino to Revit. I haven't worked much. I know that Eric Ward's been playing more with Revit or Rhino inside with Revit. And so I think you can actually start now to have live files, and so that you could change your Rhino file, and that would probably be able to be updated within Revit. But I haven't played much with those.
You
things.
can do everything Grasshopper in Revit now, and Rhino. Anything you can do in Rhino, you can do inside of Revit now. And that's
Cool.
That's where that boot camp with Zuby went.
Oh, nice.
The conclusion. Nice. So, yeah. I wanted to know about your site plan. Is this like an actual, like, you surveyed and documented site plan, and then you went in and drew it right from scratch then?
Yeah, I think we had, and there's 2 parts from what I remember. I think we had basic contours from a kind of earlier survey, and then we wanted to be really specific about what was happening with, and you can see even the individual contours from the existing house. And then I can even remember like this port, well, it's even there. I mean, I remember going out with like a line level and getting really specific points to look at specific parts of the topography. So it was a little bit of both. And so the patch surface that I showed you last night, you could take the contours, but then I think we stopped with the contours, and then we had kind of point elevations within there too that we also used as a way to get more specific within that area. And so in some ways too, like this model, what you're seeing on the screen is really the display setting, and it's really colorful and really ugly, and not really thinking too much about those things. I think there are other things within here too. I remember, let's see what happens with Arctic. I think yeah, so you can get a kind of just simple massing, kind of everything turning white within some of these. And then really what we were doing, there were renderings, there were other things that were done with it. But I think these were the kind of the file that collected all of this stuff. And then the other file that I brought is kind of maybe more complex, or at least for a bigger type of project. And this was for a competition project. We can even see my computer's not super happy with it. And this, I want to say that there were a number of people working on the model. And so you can kind of import and export things. And so if you wanted to have multiple people working in Rhino at the same time, we really treated this as a kind of master file. And so if you always share the origin or keep the origin in the same place, and I'll demonstrate this in a minute thinking about this, you could have one person modeling, say, and this was pretty common in our office when we were working on the competition project, like, okay, someone was working on this skin to do something. And so they could kind of take a chunk of the model, build that skin, and then export that skin and import it back into the master file. And so there are some ways to share some of those things. And this model, I would say, and we can see how many layers are here as well, for just being able to, some of the things like, I guess would be some of these layers are those individual panels. Yeah, we can see those turning off. And in other cases, roof, walls, floor, existing building, some by materials. And so even, I wonder, let's see if we can get a clipping plane view. Well, and even saved views. I didn't show you that. So you can have saved views within your model. So this was within the auditorium, and we can see how much was modeled. We modeled all of the chairs in the auditorium. So looking down in the auditorium. Gymnasium. In the library space. And so we, the level of detail that we had here, these were kind of reading carols, bookcases within there. These are the facade that looks out to the street. And then this is the facade back to the courtyard. This was on the roof garden. And then in the courtyard space. And so our kind of way that we would work to is that we would then render these and then bring them into Photoshop, and then also kind of add more people, add other renderings. You can see, they probably have some of the renderings too, if you guys want to see that, just in terms of the project. Let's see. Just a second, I can find. Any questions as I look for this?
So were these projects done by your firm?
Yeah.
Nice.
You said earlier there's a way to like cut sections and stuff. Can you show us that after too? Like if we were to
Yeah, I was going to do that tonight as we kind of go work through a kind of simple kind of project, and maybe just the whole workflow of that. Yeah, so at least, so the model that I just showed you starts here. And so we could use early stage Rhino files to generate these kind of line drawing diagrams, and then work on them in Illustrator a little bit, add some of the text. And then these, like you get a sense here too, like I showed you the one view in the auditorium and seeing the seats, the roof. And so we kind of would hide different aspects, pull the plan for parts of it and lay some of these elements in, the skin and the kind of shading devices.
Were those colors done in Photoshop or was this
Illustrator.
from Illustrator?
Illustrator, actually they're probably, yeah, they may have been Illustrator because there's a lot of line work. We may have also rendered some of the surfaces too. So like the purple on here was the auditorium or kind of massing for the auditorium space. So that may have been rendered. And then I want to do that tonight with you too. So we'll kind of render something and then we'll also export the line work and we'll put the lines over the rendered image. And so you can start to get a kind of composite of the two.
Yeah, that would be great because I always I'm curious, like with all whoever uses Rhino, their output, how do they come up with that? Great.
And so this is like, we would have done the labels and the colors here in Illustrator. Sometimes, I can't remember, this was a few years ago. I can't remember if we modeled the arrows in Rhino or if we just kind of faked them in Illustrator. But then this would have been a set of plans that we would have extracted the lines from Rhino and then brought them into Illustrator and worked on the line weights within Illustrator. Sections. Elevation. And so part like the shadows and some of the color we get as a rendering, and then we can put lines over the top. And then in Photoshop, we put like the wintry trees in the background, and probably the bus was in Photoshop, kind of in front and behind with those. And then these were more of the kind of renderings that we had there. So the people were done in Photoshop after the fact. And just faking, like the shadow is an easy thing to fake. I can show you a trick tonight in Photoshop for that. And then even the reflection of the people in the glass, that's just really like a 2-second Photoshop, just kind of mirror and make them transparent. And so you saw we were in the Rhino model, we were standing in that space before. So like we put all the books in Photoshop and put the people in Photoshop. And the renderings, part of our presentation was like a day in the life of the school. And so that's what the time is. How it could be used before school, during school, and after school. So a couple, and this is always why I'm advocating for the digital models, because you can have drawings from it, you could have renderings from it, you could do analysis with it. There's so many different things that you could do with the digital model, right? And just produce tons and tons of renderings or drawings or other things if you need them, or if you need to look at something. So let's see I was playing a little bit before this, and I can show you, I think what I'd like to be able to do tonight is model something pretty simple. And so I was just thinking about this as a kind of simple 10-foot by 10-foot cube, and then maybe have a kind of more organic object that we cut out of it. And then what we can do is cut a section through it, and then we could have that section. And then I also rendered, let's see where it went, quickly rendered one thing with that. Right, so I can show you just a simple way to get kind of shadows. And depending on time, what we could do is take a view like this and then use the line work as well, and then bring both of them into Illustrator and composite those. And we can do one in Photoshop too. That's more like a kind of photo rendering, and one that might be more like a drawing. Will that work for you guys if we go kind of step by step now, and as a way to build that up? It might take, I'll keep an eye on the time, and might just take a couple of hours if you guys have that. You ready? So let's start a new Rhino file, and let's do it as large objects inches. And to Susan's question before, let's poke around for a minute as we get started in some of the options. And so once you have that, go up to Tools, and then come down here at the bottom to Options. And I'll show you a couple of useful places that you can look around in here. And so there's there's document properties. And so this is specific. All of these are specific to the model that you're working within. And so it's often the case that you might want to change the units of something that you're working in. So, oh, you actually want it in feet or something like that. You can make that change here, and then it'll rescale the model. But general Rhino options, any of these below here will apply to any of your Rhino files. And so the couple of things is probably appearance. I'm looking to see if there was that specific thing about the ISO curves. Colors. And there are other instances where, like when I'm working in Grasshopper, or I want to make an animation of something in Grasshopper, I might turn all of these things white. So it's just a kind of really simple white screen, and then my geometry stands out against that. But as you're modeling, having the gray is kind of useful for that. Let's see, context menus. I don't want that. This might be the one place under general in terms of the ISO curve, show surface ISO curves, ISO curve density. That could be one place where that exists. There may be others. Modeling aids. So the one, maybe even here, view. I don't see any other about the ISO curve, but I'll look. But here's the one thing in coming here that I really wanted to show you is aliases. This makes things, mine will probably be different. And I feel like I've been adding new ones as I've been working on it. So I know, for instance, L, if you open this L, if you have L is probably lasso. If it's default. No, what's L for you? You don't have L? Oh, okay.
Well, I'm in 7, but it does not have an L listed.
Okay, so let's see if we wanted to. I have some good ones. So F is fillet, L is polyline, M is move, O is offset, C is copy. Do you guys have C? Do you have copy for C for copy? Yeah. So here's what I would do.
Mine says self-crossing for C. Like,
let's change that then. So what I would typically do is cancel this in the status bar, right? If I wanted, so you can see if I hit C and then enter, it automatically makes it to copy. And so what you could do, I'm trying to think let's see, S, snap. Oh, so here's a really good one. Let's change it for you. And I'll show you how to do it. I want to make, I told you guys last night, I love zoom selected. It's a really great tool. To set the alias, what you want to do is find the tool or find the command that you want, like polyline a second ago, I said, like I would initiate it. And then you can see where it says command and it says polyline. What you can do is Control C, and then we can go back to the aliases and paste that in. But let's do Well, you said you didn't have anything for L, right? So let's change one of these for you. The third icon down on the left is polyline. If you left click it, so left click it, and then you can see command polyline, start of polyline. Just use your cursor and grab the underscore and the whole polyline, and then just Control C and hit escape a couple times, and then we can come back to options and then aliases. And so what you can do is come down to the bottom. If you don't have anything for L, come down to the bottom and hit new, and you can see it'll say new alias. And so if you type L and then you come over here, which maybe it won't do it because I already have an L, and then you can paste polyline in there. So once you have that, you'll be able to just type L as a way to get a shortcut. Now I have to, right, because I already had L, but like zoom selected is another great one. And so I would do that, come to the top, left click, zoom selected. And the reason why I say that is sometimes the commands are slightly different. Maybe it's zoom selected, I think it worked. But then you can see under tool options and my aliases, I set Z is zoom selected. And so when I zoom something now, it'll do zoom selected. So really, if you find yourself using a command more than a couple times, so copy, line, move, offset, rotate, and some of them you may never use. Like I didn't realize that U was undo because it's Control Z. But if you find yourself using the same command over and over, I would make an alias with it. And so that's a huge time-saving thing because you can just type if you're right-handed, you'll use your mouse with your right hand and you can have your left hand on the keyboard in the same way that you might use AutoCAD or something like that if you're used to that. Okay. And you can just continue and maybe I'll point some of those things out. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll show you one other thing in a way that you could collaborate with people just as a really simple proof of concept. So because the origin is set here, let me think if I have to open multiple files, but let me make a box, just a really simple box. And let's say this is so if I save this as the file, and what I could do is if I want to, let's say make I'll make a sphere or something next to it. And we see it over here. We can export selected things, and then we could import them into a different file or import them into kind of another file. Maybe it makes sense to do this in a strange way, but what I can do, you can see that under file, there's save as, but there's also import and export. And so what we can do is export selected. And so anything that you have selected, you could export. And so if I want to just export that sphere, I can save that as a separate file. And if I go back and I open my file, I'm not going to save it this time, but I'll open the Bootcamp 1, which was just the box. And then if I import what I just saved a second ago is Bootcamp 2, which was just the sphere. Now it comes in that same place. And so that's just a really, really simple and maybe too simple proof of concept in the way that I was talking about having multiple people working on a model, is that if you had someone working on another building, let's say you were working on a master plan or on a project where there are multiple buildings, you could continue to export those things as they were developed and then import them into a kind of shared model and be able to build up something more kind of complex or crowdsourced that way. Hopefully that makes sense. But that way it allows you to kind of extract, or saving will save the whole file, opening will open a whole file, and then that's the difference with import and export. There are other things with work sessions and blocks, and we can get really complicated with some of these things, but it's more advanced, let's say.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
Say if by chance your whole model ended up for some reason getting moved, is there a way to reset it to the origin so that you would be able to always export and import to the same space?
I think, well, if you, depends. Do you know where it's supposed to be?
Well, I was just thinking, like, if everyone started off at the corner of where the X and the Y meet, that would
Yep.
be your origin, and
Yep.
then everything comes from there. So say if your model, I guess you could just move it back to the origin.
And what you might do, and maybe I'll answer your question in a very different way, which is maybe that shouldn't, let's say this, in the best case, maybe that shouldn't happen. And so what I would say is that the origin, you can typically do 0, 0, 0, which will give you the origin where X, Y, and Z are all 0. There's also shorthand in Rhino, which is just 0 works. And so when you just type 0 and enter, it'll put it at the origin. So there might be some circumstances where maybe you're, like if you have a site plan, oh, I do have. Here's the thing where I turn point off for the snap. So, right, you might have the site plan. So this might be your site, and some, in an office, what you might have within the model is the kind of project origin. It might be at the edge of your site. It might be at the edge of your building. And so maybe let's say that's a building, that's going to be at the origin, right? And your origin's not at the edge of the site, but it's right at the corner of the building, even though the site goes beyond that. Or it might be a spot in the city, might be the origin based on where your project is. And so I think just as long as you have, what you could do is to set a few key elements, and you could even put them on a layer and then lock that layer so that that can't get moved, and so that it just kind of protects some of those things. I think we lost him. Oh no.
Yeah,
still there.
no, that
Okay,
makes
okay.
sense. That makes sense. Thanks.
So should we model something? Who's up for it? We're gonna do it. So let's start with this. Let's build this kind of little pavilion thing. And so as a frame of reference, let's start, and maybe I'll try and remember, we'll try and use a few layers for something. Let's make a box, and we can do corner to corner and height. And so, and given what Nicholas just asked, maybe we'll start with our box and type 0, then enter as the first corner, and then it wants the next dimension. Let's make this 10 feet. So even though our units of this model are in inches, we can still say 10 with a single apostrophe, which will be feet. So that will set your next dimension. And now you can see, you can even move to a different window. Now we need the other dimension in plan. So we can say 10 feet again and type enter or right click. And now it's looking for the height. And we can say 10 feet again and enter. So now we have a 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot cube that we have here. And so what I'd like to do is to begin to imagine this thing as a solid. And it is a solid, I guess, for what this is. And let's use and play a little bit with what we did last night, is make a couple of lofted objects that will be like a kind of vessel that could sit within this cube, and it might cut out of the cube. And so you might think about it just as a subtraction out of the cube, or the rendering that I showed you a minute ago had those elements coming out of the cube. And so let's start in plan and let's change our layer. And so let's leave our default as our initial cube. And then let's change layer 1 to be our current layer. So now as we draw something, it'll be in red. And so I'm going to use the control point curve just because I like these kind of vessel-like objects. I'm going to draw some control points. And then as I get close to the end, you can click close up here, or you can type C to close, and then space or enter or right click, and you'll get a kind of shape that sits within there. If you want to manipulate it, you can click on it and even move some of those points around. And so what we can also see is that we've been drawing on the construction plane, and so that's on the bottom of the cube. And so what I want to do is just click on that shape, and in the front view or side view, let's move that up, let's say 7 inches. And so I just did that by moving, and then if I did that too quickly, so M for me is move, where you can type, when you type M, you see all of them come up. So then when you do O, B, so you can type it in. So once you get move, it asks you the point to move from. You can select anywhere on this, anywhere, and it's basically the reference point. And then it'll move in relationship to that point. So if I say 7 inches, now it's constraining that. And if I hold down shift and left click vertically above that, it'll move it 7 inches directly up. Does that
Carl,
work for
would it
everybody?
be wrong for me to mention, like, if you just hit the up arrow on the gumball, you can put your 7 inches in and it just pops it up. If you know you're going straight up, is
There
that
you go.
correct? As a quick
Yep.
way to do it too.
Yep.
To make the curved lines, which one did you use?
I used the 4th one down, the control point curve.
Okay.
There's probably, and if you hold that down, there's a whole bunch of other points. The second one is interpolate points. So it'll go through those points. Doesn't any, even if you wanted to use a polyline and have it be not curvy, you could do that too. So let's control things a little bit now too, in maybe a way that we haven't done before. And I think it's in these moments of like, where you really want to be specific about something where it's going to matter. And so what I'd like to do is I'm going to make the perspective view the full screen. And what I want to do is to set the C-plane to be either the, let's set it to be the front. And what we also see is that because we were working on the origin, that now comes to the front of the box. And if you go to the C-plane tab, we can change the elevation of that, which will be able to kind of push it front to back. And if we choose that second box, what I want to do is I want to snap and have the C-plane be in the mid plane of the box. Right, so now we have the C-plane through the middle there. And the reason why I wanted to do that is, let's see how we would get a simple, what I want to do is to kind of draw a curve that's kind of through the middle of this and then comes out of the box. And we can use that as a way to host some other geometry. And so what I'd like to do, and I'm pretty sure this is a command, curve from objects. Here's a simple way. Here's what I would do is to make a surface that's just a plane, corner to corner. and draw it kind of big enough through the box, because what I want to get is the intersection of that first curve that we drew and the plane that I just drew. And so if I go to curve from objects intersection, that will give us 2 points. Basically, the intersection between that curve and that surface is going to be a point at each one of those. And so what I might do now is to draw a polyline from one point to the other point, right? And so now I get a sense through the middle of that, where that curve intersects it. Now I can even find the midpoint of that curve. So this is basically the midpoint. Now, if I draw another curve, I can go from here and go up, and I know that that's at the midpoint. Is everyone able to do that?
I think you lost me from midpoint to midpoint. I just went midpoint to midpoint of the box because we moved the surface. So what did you actually
So you
draw?
could,
the polyline
so that's,
from?
you could do that too. You could draw on the bottom, you could draw midpoint to midpoint of your box. And then you could also, you could then just move that line up. What did we do? 7 inches. And so now you could have a line that's through the middle. That could also work.
But you found the midpoint of your curve, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. How did you do that? I'm sorry.
Just the snaps down at the bottom. So can you see my mouse down here? Do you have
Yeah.
mid selected?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you mouse over, you should be able to find the mid, right? As you move along the line, right? It'll say end, an intersection, and it'll say mid will be the midpoint.
So, okay, that's okay.
How did you get the CPlane again? I
Yeah,
missed that.
that's okay. The C-plane's really, really important. And so I think I chose front. So when we start, the default is that it's in the XY plane. And so by changing it to either front or back or left or right, it'll flip it up. And so I did 2 steps, which is I first chose front. And then when I set it to be in the front, it's on the kind of front of the box. And then the second C-plane, if you're in the C-plane tab, the second icon over allows you to change the elevation. And so what I did then is just snapped to the midpoint of our cube, and then it moved that C-plane back, right? So now you can see it, the C-plane is through the middle of this.
So first you select the facing that you want, and then you hit the set C-plane, or is it first you
Yeah.
hit? Okay.
Yeah. And only because if we wanted to change, if we wanted to work in plan, which we will in a second, and we go and we draw something else, we can then change the elevation in plan, right, and have it move up or down. But because I wanted it to, the other option is that you can also snap to it. So you can use this C-plane to set it to a surface, and we could choose that surface and then enter a couple times, and then it's there. And then because we're using the box, I wanted it to be at the center of the box. And so that's why I changed the elevation of it to then be at the midpoint, which is right there. And all of this, I'm trying to be a little more specific for some of these things, because and maybe it's too much. We could be a little more sketchy with it too. Basically, what I'm trying to do is just draw a line that comes out, like starts at the bottom and comes out the side. And what I want to do is use that line to put a couple more shapes on, and so that we can loft 3 shapes together. And so what I was going to do is do it in the kind of front view, and then also do one on the side view. And so that we'll have 2 intersecting shapes. So we'll get 2 skylights from that interior volume. But it also, again, I'm being kind of prescriptive in a way that when I'm working on a project, I want to be very specific about some of the dimensions or the geometry. We could probably work in the front view and not have to slide it back. But I just wanted to bring some of these things together for you guys tonight. So you guys have a curve in elevation you can work off of. So let's use this other tool, which is the fourth C-plane tool. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth one over, which is to set a C-plane perpendicular to a curve. And so what this allows us to do is to set a C-plane. You can see as I drag along that curve, it'll set it on there. So let's start with one just at our endpoint, right? And now our construction plane is up there on the top. I'm just going to draw a kind of another control point curve that's maybe a little bit smaller. That's a kind of oculus that might be up on the top. So what we're going to make is this kind of like, I don't know, vessel shaped element that's here. Does everybody have that? The next one that I want to do is move that C-plane, again, using perpendicular curve to somewhere kind of along the middle of the curve. That way we can just draw a third shape. Fourth, fifth, sixth, however many we want, but we'll just do 3 simple shapes. And try not to snap to anything. And if you do have a problem where you end up snapping to something, we can disable the snaps so that it doesn't override anything. Because in the end, we want that shape to be flat on that construction plane. And what's nice with the gumball as well, you can see my shape is coming out of the side of the box. I don't necessarily want that. So I can just slide it. Nope, I don't want to slide the path. I want to slide the curve. And because it's on that C-plane and the C-plane's at an angle, the gumball is orthogonal to the construction plane. So I can just use the green arrow and slide this a little bit so that it's sitting inside the box. But it's also not entirely necessary either if yours is outside or anything like that. Does everybody have three shapes that we might be a little off? Susan, just turn off your mute. Just like keep talking to me the whole time and tell me to slow down.
That's okay. I'm just complaining to myself. You don't need to hear it. I'm way behind. I got mixed up in the minutia.
That's
So,
okay. Where are you at?
Oh,
You want
honey,
me to do it again?
I am still trying to get the damn first curve from the intersection of the midpoint.
That's okay.
It's just snapping and I have my snaps off, so I don't understand what it's doing. Did you
Turn your
use
snaps
polyline?
on.
Did you just use a polyline? Well, I snapped to connect and then I turned them off because it wants to it won't let me go out the top of the box. Let me go back over this view. Did you just do a polyline to draw that line
This-
up and out that you're using to log?
I use the control point curve again, which is the 1, 2, 3, fourth one down on the left. And so in that,
You turned the second and the one inside, like turned it so it follows the curve.
this one,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you use, the fourth C-plane tool, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth one over, is to set it perpendicular. And what's nice about that is that once you select that, you can see that the C-plane is always going to be normal through that curve at whatever point you choose. And so if I wanted to draw something at this point on there, I could draw another shape there. And so you can just basically, I mean, you could also get very specific with it, right? We could divide and this is almost getting into some of the grasshopper things in the way that I might work, is that I could divide this curve into 10 points. And then I could use the construction plane at either of those points, right? So I could select the line and then I can snap to that point. And then I have the construction plane through a specific point. For what we're doing tonight, we don't need that many points or that kind of specificity.
So then once you did that, did you just copy and paste it to that plane? The earlier one?
This curve,
Yeah,
I drew a new curve on that construction plane.
okay.
That's a little bit bigger. So basically I'm gonna, I'm gonna go ahead a little bit, Susan, but I'm also like buying you some time. But I'll just show you the next step for us will be to loft these three things together, which is why I didn't just copy it, but I made slightly different size shapes. And so that we'll get a kind of vessel shaped kind of thing like that. And I can come back. What do we need? What do you need, Susan?
Oh, I've just lost steps, but I think the next step was to orient to the curve, but
Yeah.
it doesn't look right, but maybe it is.
With the CPlane?
Yeah, maybe it is. It's just kind of skewed off at the end.
And it may, and that's
Doesn't
okay.
matter.
We're
I'll
making
loft
stuff
some
that's not
shapes.
super specific.
Yeah, I can get some shapes to loft. I'm pretty sure I can do that. So.
Okay. And so what I was going to do is like, we have that one, and what we might do is start copying this and start playing with it a little bit, is that I was going to do that again from another direction. And so if we were working in the front view where we drew this and it came up and out to the side, that now I'll do it also from the right view, right or left. And so what I'll do is I'll figure out where the C-plane is. Okay, it's there. I'm going to change the elevation of it and now come to the midpoint of the box again. And so this way, we're going to work in the other direction and draw a separate kind of curve that comes out and from the top. And I'll use maybe that same, can I use the same midpoint? Actually, we could cheat and even just use the project. Although none of the curve doesn't really matter. The curve that we're making an elevation is just a way to kind of set or maybe kind of cheat a little bit to make our geometry for our loft. Right, but I'll draw this and have this come out. And we can use the same shape on the bottom or a different shape on the bottom. But what I would do is, again, select that curve, draw another shape on the top. They could be round or they could be control point curves. And then I'll do another one kind of halfway through. And if you have we saw last night that the snaps will override the construction plane. It's really simple, just come down to the bottom and there's this disable down at the bottom. And so if you're like, I'm starting to have a lot of geometry in here and I don't want it, as I draw this last shape, I don't want it to snap to anything. So I can disable my snaps for just a minute. And what I'm sure of is that as I'm drawing on that construction plane and it's not being overridden by anything else. Draw. Yeah, there it is. If we want to adjust it or want to manipulate any of the control points or change its location, then we have that as well. Faster, slower? Not faster, right? What can I help with? You guys are going to get so fast so soon, you'll see.
How did you reset the seaplane to like go on the bottom?
I went and changed it to the top view again.
Okay, thank you.
What can I help with? Does everybody have a box and 2 lofts?
I'm trying to make the second one right now.
Okay, that's good. Renee, 1 loft, 2 lofts, no lofts? What do you got? Ashley,
A box.
you have a box? That's okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to, you said set the seaplane, go to the top view to set the seaplane. I'm trying to draw the first curve that's
Uh-huh.
down at the bottom. So I went to the top view and hit seaplane, but it's still drawing up the top of my box.
So then you can change the second box under the seaplane tab allows you to change the elevation. And I wonder if there's also another way. Let's see what happens. So we can set it with a dimension. It's always going to be perpendicular to where it is. So if we actually wanted to do it at 7 inches, we could set it to 7 inches. If you want to set it back to 0, you could type 0. No, it's relative. So I have to set it to -7 inches to get it back there. So if you don't have something to snap to, there's also a way to control it a little bit. So you're trying to draw that first shape right there, right?
Yeah, setting the seaplane elevation worked better.
Okay. And my trick too of like when we start and we draw this kind of curve, not that curve. We go. This curve, right? My trick of drawing that curve in elevation then just allows us, rather than elevating the seaplane based on a kind of relative number, we can just set the seaplane normal to that curve along its length. And so it's just different ways of setting some of those things. So then how many people have 2 lofts ready to go? 1, 2. Ashley, yes. Okay. Christy, how you doing?
Okay, it's not exactly like yours, but it's I didn't
That's
mean,
okay. I wouldn't know what that would look like. Mine is not very exact either.
I have just a simple question. Isn't there a way over somewhere on the properties panel or to turn the ISO curves off?
Yours are on too. I was trying to look this. So there is. So under properties, if you click on an object, it's ISO curve density, which is down at the bottom. So you can click that off and then the ISO curves will be off. You see it? So you can increase them, but then you can also just click that checkbox and it'll turn them off.
I just have a question. Like sometimes when I draw a line, it kind of goes into the other axis and then it's kind of just like floating in air. So what's the way to do it where you know exactly like where it's going?
I think, is it snapping? Is it like snapping to something else and coming off of your construction plane?
Like usually what happens is like when I try to like draw like a curved line or something, I want it to go like in one plane, but then it kind of goes in an angle, if that
I
makes
think-
sense.
Is it because is it snapping to something?
No, like
Sure.
I'm working in perspective. So is there like a
Uh-huh.
way that, like I know you're saying setting the plane, but sometimes it still goes like maybe in the X direction when I want it to go just straight up.
You want it to go up?
Yeah, like for example, like this one, like is it drawn in the same plane or is it see how it's in an angle right there? Like when you put it flat, is it in an
It is.
angle?
Nope, it's not at an angle. It's flat.
Okay.
See, that's the construction plane. And
Okay.
that's there. But sometimes what can happen, and this is what I was asking, the snap, and we talked a little bit about it last night. If it's not snapping to anything, it will always be flat on the construction plane. But if you end up snapping to something, oh, and my snaps are disabled, right? It will actually, the snap will override the construction plane. And so now that is not three-dimensional, right? It got super weird because the snap overrides it. And it's like, okay, if you're not giving me any snap information, I'm going to be stuck to the construction plane. But if there's a snap, then I'm going to jump off of the construction plane. And so that's why sometimes if you have a lot of, right, and this is not at all what I wanted, it's kind of really crazy. But if you have a lot of things and you're trying to draw and you don't want it to snap, you can come down to the bottom and kind of temporarily disable the snaps. And so like the difference would be now, no matter what I draw, it's not going to snap to anything, even though I'm drawing through all of this geometry.
Mhm.
That thing, when I close that, that's still flat, right? When I move and I look at the construction plane. But if I don't disable it, and even worse, if you have near on, right? Near, you really almost never want near snap on because it'll snap to anything.
Mhm.
Watch what
I
happens.
think that's what I had on.
Ah,
Okay.
right. So watch what happens now as I start to like draw through this object, right? It's going to potentially snap to things, and I'm going to intentionally like snap to things to make it do it, right? That's not flat anymore because
Okay, I
it's
think that's
because
the
of that.
problem this whole time. Yeah,
Yep.
I've been
And
having.
so make sure you turn off near, but you know, there might be really, and this is the thing, even mid command. Susan, I'm buying time for you as I answer these questions.
I had 2 lofts.
Okay, good. Everybody
I
else have 2 lofts? Renee, how about you? All right, Renee, I'm buying a little bit more time for you.
I still have a question too, but
Okay, that's good. And so what I wanted to show is that even mid command, right? Here I'm starting to draw a curve and I've made a few points. I can decide, actually, I want to disable the snap. And you can disable the snap. And then you know what? I want to come back in. Maybe I do want a specific snap. And then I choose near. And then I can choose something along this line, right? And it's near, and I do that. But then I want to turn near off because it's such a dangerous snap to have on. And then I can come back down and click here, and then I can close this, right? So you can kind of manage your snaps even mid command as you're doing something. So it's okay if you find that you're snapping to something and you don't want to be, come down and disable it just for a minute, and then come back and then re-enable your snaps.
Kind of like CAD, right? Like the same thing. with
Yeah.
CAD.
Yeah. So AutoCAD, the thing was called like a UCS, or it used to be called a user coordinate system or something like that. All right, Susan, you had a question.
Yes, my CPlane is still on that SKU and I can't get it to go back to the bottom of the box. And I tried going to the top view to get it to orient and it's just not changing.
No, don't go to the top view. Under the CPlane tab, set
Yeah.
it to CPlane world top right here. That should set it back down to the XY plane.
So it doesn't matter what view I'm in.
It doesn't matter what view you're in. It doesn't matter what view you're in, because we're kind of overriding when we're working in the perspective view. So your top view, if you're working in the 4 views, your top view will maintain the, I think, the top C plane, maybe not.
I understand now. That's why I was
Okay.
confused. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I may have said top view too.
You just said top probably, and I just assumed.
Yeah, so if you set the C plane to the top. And the other thing too is that, not that we're going to get into it, but you can save, maybe we should have done this. If I find, so here's the curve that I drew. C planes are really like, the more you get into this, the more you're going to have a higher level of control. You're going to be able to control the geometry. The construction plane is really important, and you can also save them. So like when we set our C plane all the way out here, you'll see that you can set C plane. So there's an option to save C plane by name. And so you could start to get specific and say, okay, this is going to be, rather than call it C plane 1, I'm going to call it curve 1 and let me do it. Name for C plane view. Curve 1. I think you can't have spaces. So that way, what's nice about these is if you come back to your top C plane and you want to come back to a saved view, let's import. Name to restore. I think there's a display. Set it to view. There's undo and redo. There's select C plane. There's a whole bunch of other tools within here. You can set it to a view. C plane to restore. Now I forgot the name, so I'm not going to mess with that. But you can save views, as I showed you in that earlier model, where you can set specific views, and you can also save C planes. Renee, good? Yes? Is that yes, or is that stop?
Oh, go ahead. No, you can go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you.
It looked like you're going to explode, Renee.
I know, you're like.
One thing after another today.
So what I would also do in the way of working in a way, or when I work with Rhino, is that because it's not parametric in that we can't change the settings and have these things update, what I would do is to copy this object. And we know that our box is 10 feet wide, so maybe 20 feet. I'll move it over 20 feet in the X direction, and then I have a copy. And so what I'm going to do is the next set of operations I'll do on this one, but that would allow me to go back. If we work on this and we do something that we don't like, we can always go back to this one. And so it's pretty often that I might have 15 or 20 different models within the same file where they're kind of key stages along there. And so what I want to do with the next part, and we can even go back to standard and do zoom selected, And so that way, as we orbit, we'll orbit around our second one. I want to do 2 operations to this, which is to cap our 2 lofts and then union them together. And so we can select the first one, type cap. And that should, when we cap, does that make it? I think it makes it all one thing. And so then we can select our other one and we can cap that. And now this just turned the red elements into solids as well. And even if I were being really, really, really precise about these things, maybe I'll copy this one 20 feet over as well, right? So that step has caps on it. This one's capped, and then we can union these 2 elements together. So we can use it up in the top under solid and union. We can select one of our lofts and then the other loft. And that should join it into one object now. Let me know if that worked or didn't work for you guys. And even along this stage, if I wanted to clean it up, I could probably delete all of the curves, because at this stage, all I want are the surfaces. And the way that I might do that is that I know that now there's just 2 objects. There's the box and the loft. So if I hold down Shift and select the loft and the box, I can hide it temporarily using the light bulb. And now I see all of that other geometry there. Maybe I'll delete this geometry and the third one over. And then I can unhide that. Did I go too fast? Do it again.
Is there a way to like isolate elements? Like if you just want to like isolate your lofts, for instance.
Layers are probably the easiest way to do that. And so like even in this case, right, we have the boxes isolated, or we could come down here and we can call this one, say like loft 3. And then the way that you move things into different layers is we can select it, and then under properties, we can change it from layer 1 to the loft 3 layer. And within our layers, that gives us a little bit of control in terms of what we want to see, how we want to work on those. There are other ways under edit, and there's a selection filter. And then I want to say there's also select objects. So you can select all the curves, or you can select lines, or you can select surfaces. And so that's one way to do something. You can also join things into one, and you can also group multiple objects into one group as well. Right? So like if I select my 3 boxes and then Control G is join, Control G is group. Now, if I select one of them, all 3 of them get selected. And so you can use between groups and layers. There's a way you can start to have kind of some sophistication in terms of selecting geometry. And then Control Shift G will ungroup them.
Okay. When I try to union my 2 lofts, it says it fails. You know why that
failed?
Yeah.
Did they cap? Did you cap them?
Yeah, I believe so. You look at.
So like if you look at them on mine, right, you can see that end is open, but this end that end has a cap on it.
Let me try that again. So I just click and type cap, right?
Yeah, you just type cap.
Or do I?
You select it, and if they're planar, they should get capped and it should become a solid at the end.
Okay, so I have to type cap first, then select, then enter.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, they weren't
That
capped
worked.
before, so.
Okay, so hopefully when you cap both of them, then they become a closed solid and then they should union together. Let's see. Let's hope it doesn't fail.
No, it's still failed.
It still failed. You want to share your
Yeah.
screen?
Sure. So if I hit this, so I go solid, union, one. I don't have to enter in between, right? I just select two of them and then hit enter.
Yeah, just watch the status bar, because some of these things I don't even remember the order. I'm just like, I'm used to pressing enter when it needs an enter.
Yeah.
Some of them you can pre-select or post-select, like do the command first or have it selected and then initiate the command.
So select surfaces to union, select them, hit enter. Yes, it just says Boolean union fail.
Share your screen. Let's see what it looks like. It can be a geometry problem sometimes.
I thought I was sharing my screen.
Oh, that's okay.
Share. Okay. So if I select, so if I go to solid, union, select,
Select the. Oh wait.
solid, union, select one, select two, enter.
Yeah, it does. It is failing.
I don't know.
But it's also giving you that. Click that little exclamation point down at the bottom. Oh. So try this, because I wasn't sure if we would have a problem by having because we shared the bottom surface or the bottom curve when we lofted them. Take one of your red vessels and just move it. So take that one and move it in the red direction a little bit. Yeah. And now try it again. Yeah. That worked that time.
Yep, that worked. Yeah. So it was because it was on the bottom. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just sometimes when the geometry is maybe too like right on top of one another or too close, then it can create a little bit of a problem.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did you ever do planar union or Boolean union?
Boolean union.
Yeah, when I did it, it got rid of one.
It shouldn't.
Yeah, let's just keep moving on.
And there's nothing specific about what I'm doing tonight either. We're just kind of playing with some shapes, and I kind of want to make a space that we can stand in, and something that's, when we cut a section through it, we can kind of see what's happening with that. So if you're able to union it, so I might even just like do the same and copy my box and my union again. Union, copy it over 20 feet. We're building a kind of nice history of these things. You could do a couple of things here. If we could Boolean difference the one shape out of the other, but then we'll lose the vessel as it comes out the top. And so what we could do is copy the unioned object kind of into the same place again. And the way that I would do it is select it and copy and maybe click a point on the box, right, which will make a copy, but then click that same point again. So now we should have two objects right on top of one another, which is okay, I think, for what we're doing. Maybe we need this, maybe we don't. But what I would do is, first step is to do solid Boolean difference, or solid difference, and select the surface or polysurface to subtract from. So we want to keep our cube and press enter, and then select surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract with. And then we want to choose one of our vessels. Right, and then I was right because it goes away. The one you're subtracting with gets deleted. And so what we have now is what kind of box? Should we have done that? Let's see.
Can you repeat those steps again?
Yeah. Control Z is nice. So I'm going to copy my over 20 feet. And so, and maybe I'll do it a slightly different way this time so we can see why I did what I did a second ago. What I want to do is Boolean difference the vessel out of the cube. And so we'll go to solid and then difference. And it asks for the thing to keep. So we want to keep the box and then press enter. Then select the vessel, press enter. And now we see we get that subtracted out of the other one. Which is okay and nice, and we like that. But I was also like, oh, I kind of like these elements that are coming out of the top. So if I undo it, the one thing that I'll do is, and I might do it a slightly different way this time too, is I'll copy those vessels just by choosing one of the corner points and then putting it back at that same point. So now I have two of the vessels right on top of one another. And let's even do this. Let's take one of them because they're right on top of one another. I'm going to hide one. And this time around, I'm going to Boolean difference, but I'm going to keep the vessel. I can't do that, sorry. I think what we can do is trim. So if we trim, select the cutting objects, choose the box, press enter, choose the vessel. And now what we have is just the vessel as it pokes out of the top of the box. And then we can unhide the vessel that we had hidden. And I can do this again in a second. I know I'm going fast, but I think now I've got a nice way to do it. I can hide the vessel that just pokes out of the top and hide that one for a second. And now we can Boolean difference this one out. So solid difference, keep the box, cut out those, and then bring this back. Right, so now we've got a transition from the vessel being cut out of the box as a subtraction and then the vessel coming out of the box as a surface. Should I do it again?
I think I got it. I'm just going to try it.
The last thing that I would do is explode the surface that's coming out of the top now and delete the caps that we made a little while ago. So we wanted the caps to turn it into a solid, but now what we'll do is we'll inhabit the inside of the space and we'll get a sense of these kind of oculi that come out of the top of the box. Anybody want me to do it again?
Could you do the last one again?
What was the last one? Getting rid of the capped pieces?
Excellent. Yeah.
So
Or just having the tops there.
just the tops.
Mm.
How far back? What does yours look like? You want to share your screen?
I didn't start that one yet.
Which one?
Just having like the purple out.
Uh-huh.
Is how to subtract and
Yeah. So let me, and this is what's nice about copying these two. And what I should do is add a couple more copies. But so if I come back over here, make another one of these. So the steps that I would do is, because when we make a difference object, we end up losing the thing that we cut away. So the first thing that I would do is to copy the vessel. And I just want to copy it back in the same place. So I might just choose a corner point and then choose that same corner point. And then if I click on it, we can see that we have two of them and they're in exactly the same place. So I'm going to select one of them and hide it using the light bulb on the top. And hiding it just means we can't see it, we can't select it, nothing happens. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is trim. Trim works on surfaces. And so if I type trim, the cube is going to be the cutting object. And so I select that, select the cutting object, press enter. Then I'm going to select the vessel and kind of cut the inside of the vessel away so that I just have those pieces that are the spouts that are coming out on the top. Press enter and I have that. Right. What I'll do is I'll unhide by right-clicking the light bulb. It'll show everything that I've hidden. And now, even as we move around, we get this kind of zebra pattern because we have two surfaces overlapping up there. And what I'll do is as I select it, I'll select the one that's just the spouts and I'll hide that this time. And now what I want to do is Boolean difference the whole vessel out of the cube. So solid difference, select the cube, enter, select the vessel, enter, and then that cuts it away. And now when I unhide that other object, now I end up with the vessels poking out on the top. The last thing that I would do, because if we go here, I'll try and go inside of the object.
you get difference, right? For to get that volume inside.
Yep, exactly. Solid difference. And maybe it doesn't need to be a different color anymore. So I can put it back on the first layer. So the last thing that I would do here is I want the vessels to be open so that there can be light coming in from them. And so I'm going to select the vessel that's on the top and I'll explode it. And so explode is either the little kind of explosion symbol, middle, halfway down, or you can type explode. And then what that does is you can see it just turned it into a bunch of individual surfaces, which means that I can select the end caps and delete just those end caps. I can select this and join it back together, but I don't have to necessarily. So what I want to do now is to just start to play with some representations of this. So even if you have one vessel or something cut through the cube, we can do that and we can play with it in a couple of different ways. So does that work? Should I go on to the next stage? Not seeing any frantic no's. So let's develop a couple of different things with this. One, and what we were playing with a little bit yesterday is, let's see, what should we do first? I'm going to copy it so that I have that original object. And so some of this is just like, how do we make some drawings, or how do we start to get a sense for this? So maybe before we even do that, is maybe we should try and get inside of it. And for this, it's maybe a little easier to go back to the multiple views. And with the multiple views, you can select the objects so you can make sure you're seeing what's there. Is that if make your current view the perspective view, and then if we come up to view and set camera, we can show camera, or I guess F6 will also show the camera. And so what we want to show is in the other views, we're going to show the camera of our perspective view. And so what's nice about that is that we can start to move our camera with this kind of representation in the other views, right? So as I move it top, up and down, in the front view, I'm changing the elevation. As I move it in the plan view, I'm moving it closer. And what I really want to do is to get inside. And then we can start to look around inside and also change with the properties. We can change it from parallel to perspective. We can change its distance to target. So we can change it from a 50mm lens to maybe a 20mm lens. And as we also move around and orbit around, that's not what I wanted to change.
Carl, you had your top view selected when you changed the lens length.
I know.
I'm not trying to bird dog you here.
No, I realize that.
As well, your cubes look distorted there.
I know, I realized that as soon as I saw that. So now we get more of a wide angle view. And if that happens, you can go back to your top view and you can set that to top. Now we can kind of move inside. So this is kind of looking up in the space. But because this is such a tight space, and it's sometimes difficult in a small space to get a sense for that, you have to get a really wide angle lens to do it. What we can do is to start to cut the object apart and start to make, we could do a plan cut and we can do a section cut with this. So I'm going to turn F6 to turn that off. We can even save this view. So if you right click in the perspective view, set view, and then you can change it. If you come down to named views, we can have multiple views set up. And this is how we set those. So named view, we can click the disk and just save this as camera 1 maybe. So So that way, if we navigate around and we get out of that view, we can still come back and right click to set view. And then we see camera 1. We can come back to there. So how about we cut a section so that we can get a better sense for that space, and we can even render the section like I showed you guys when I started. So I'm going to copy the whole thing again, because the section and the way that I'm going to do it can be a little destructive. There are ways to do it with clipping planes and other things, but I kind of really want to cut this apart. And so to do that, let's come back to our construction plane again and use a construction plane in the front view or the side view, depending on which orientation you want to cut it in. And here I'm going to be I'm not going to set the elevation of the construction plane. I'm just going to draw a plane corner to corner, big enough so that it'll intersect with all of that. Then I can go back to the top construction plane and I can move this element back to a point that I want to cut through. Where does it make sense to cut a section through this? You guys still with me? Ready to cut a section? So in this case, we can do one of two things. We could use trim, or you could also do it as a solid, right? We could extrude this box and make it a big box and cut one out of the other. We could trim, which would just take these elements and delete them, but we could also split it. And I'll show you why I want to split it. We'll get the two halves. And so if we type split, it asks us select objects to split. I'm going to window and select that whole thing without selecting the plane. Then it says enter or right click or space bar. And then it's select cutting objects. I'll select the plane and then hit enter. And it looks like nothing's happened, but what's happened is that this should have cut the model, and so that we can select the front half. And for now, maybe we'll just hide it. And now we get a section into this. We can clean it up a little bit. Did the split work for people? Maybe, yes, no? Split? People have sections? Going too fast? Going too slow? It's too late already?
I think I got it.
You think you got it? And I'm not
Yeah, I
sure.
got it.
I want to try. I'm curious. I don't think that I'll be able to cap this object.
Did you just delete the other half? Is that what?
I hit it.
Okay.
So capping actually worked for me when I cap this, and even what I might do is explode it, and then even change the color, display color. So I get a kind of section cut through there. So I want to do two more things. I want to render, I want to set a view. I want to put some light on this and have some shadows. And then I'm also going to make 2D so that we get line drawings, and then we'll bring it into Illustrator and have both of these together. Right? And that same concept would work for doing a kind of cut plan and seeing something beyond and working in a different way. The other thing is that this type of section technique is a little bit, I'd say a little dishonest, because what we're going to do is we're going to get the light coming into the section, which it normally wouldn't come into because the other half is there. And so there is a way, I don't think we have time tonight, but there is a way to make a material. And so what we could do, maybe just as a way to clean this up, I'm going to select all of these and group them together. Then I'll unhide my other object and select those and group them together. There's another technique that would let you select the things that are, when we render, select all of this object and make it invisible, but still cast shadows. And with that technique, the light wouldn't be coming into the object. The light would only come through the two openings on the top. And so it would be a different kind of representation. But for now, for this, I'm just going to hide that front object. And I'm going to do it as a kind of straight. So it's the front view for me. It might be the side view for you. I'm going to go to the front view. Not sure why it's not. There we go. And I can even turn this onto ghosted. All right, so mainly when I look at the properties of this view, it's a parallel projection. And so it's a kind of straight elevation for this. And let's try and render something. We'll see how quick it is, but just in the most basic sense, what we want to do is set the view. And we'll come up to render. And the current renderer is just Rhino render. And if we come to the tabs over on the right, there's a render option. I just want to set, I'm going to leave all the settings there with the exception of two things. I want to turn on the sun and set the sun. And for this, I'm going to set it to manual control. I want the sun to be low enough, and here it's going to come from the south. I'm going to do it once quickly to see where it's actually coming from, if it's coming in. And then if it's not, I can move it around to be on the north or on the west. But for now, I'm going to hope that maybe from the southeast, it'll give us some nice shadows. So with that, we have sun and skylight on. I'm just going to come down to the bottom right and click render. Which it doesn't always like this when I'm also have Zoom running. So we'll see what happens. And there is the kind of real-time render, but it doesn't always give the shadows accurately. So we could also set this to be rendering smaller, to be a little faster, but doesn't take that long. Now I feel like it's taking too long.
I had a question while this is loading.
Yeah.
How do you remove the camera lines? Or like the
F6, I think, will display them or not display them.
okay, because that camera, I'm trying to delete it, but it's not happening.
Don't delete the camera. I think it's just viewing it or not viewing it. So if you type function key F6, does that hide it? Does that work?
No. Let me try it again.
Or in a second, I don't know if this will let me work on anything. If you go up to view, oh no, well, let me do it. I think under view and then camera settings, it's like show or hide camera.
You go back to that tab that you were on for the set the camera. You can go back and just click show camera and it'll shut off. It's underneath, like if you're in the perspective view, underneath that tab. And then set camera.
So if
And
you
then
click
just
the
click
tab, if you
camera
right click the
again.
tab,
Or just that arrow, yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
so the next time I might do this so it's on smaller rendering. Let me even see if there's a faster way. We can try it. We can try the other ray trace option and see if that's faster. But basically what you'll do when you render something is you'll be able to save this as a JPEG. And we could bring that into Illustrator and slip it behind a drawing. We could also make a couple changes to this. And one change that I might make, well, it actually doesn't matter. The section cut, when we make a 2D drawing, will also give us that shape. So we can fill it with a solid color in a second. Now it's almost done, so I think it's worth just keeping it.
Carl, I think that your image resolution was really high. That's why it may have been taking really a long time.
Yeah,
At the
I'll
bottom,
make,
it's
I'll make it
54.
smaller if we do it again. Oh yeah, it is huge. All right, next time it won't be so big. So you could iteratively work on this with the kind of exposure level, and we can also see when it finishes in a second, we can also play a bit with some of this in the right in terms of post-processing it. But it's almost done. So keep it at this point. Is everyone else able to render? Try and render? Yeah. Okay, so we can play a little bit. It's still slow. So what I'm going to do is save this, and it'll save a JPEG. And I'll close that. And while we're here, what I'm going to do is select this, and then we'll make 2D, which will give us outputs of these lines. So we're going to use the view that we have, which is our front view. We can use hidden lines. I don't think we want tangent lines. I love silhouette lines. So we can say, okay, it'll drop it on a layer for all of this. And I believe we'll see it in the top view. Selected, I'm just going to move it away. So we have that. And now if we select this and export it, we can export that as an Illustrator file. So export selected. Save it. So my downloads, and then I'm going to save this as an AI file. Adobe Illustrator file. Maybe I'll name it the same thing. I think it was render 001 lines. Don't worry, I'm not so worried about the scale here. And let me open Illustrator and we can bring these two things together. Let's see what we get. We can do one more. We could do a plan view. We can also do a kind of perspective view with the section. So we have this with a few layers now. Get a sense out of it, but then we can also place on another layer. Our image file. Hide that for a second until I sort out some of these. This is not the best Make 2D I've ever done that. Make all the lines black. I'm going to make the lines a lot thinner. And ideally, what we should get is the ability to have the kind of section there. So I'm not totally loving it, but you guys get the sense of being able to lay in the shadows behind. I think I probably selected one too many things, but ideally what we could get is the profile lines of the section cut and be able to give that a solid color as well. Visible curves, silhouette curves. Maybe by selecting silhouette curves, it kind of confused it. But we can also do it in a slightly different version if we go back to Rhino. What I also like is just being able to render it as a view. So say something more like this. So we'll get the section perspective. Before I render, I'm going to make the resolution a lot smaller. should be about a third of the time. I think the other problem I created was rendering. So I exploded the object, and so I think it was making, when it made 2D, it was making all those as separate lines. And so we could do a couple of things. You could change the material of this element so that it does render with a different color. But we could also take this object, then save this. I should probably hide the other object behind, but in the interest of time. So if I join this all together as one now, we'll see what it does for the make 2D. The other thing, sometimes it makes sense in Rhino. Take a look at the lines, and it might be a little easier to control here. I might just grab these and join them together. So that when I bring it into Illustrator, I can get a nice section. That's joined together. Same thing, we just export selected. Takes a second just to get the scale to match. I might set a corner first. Didn't retain. Oh, there we go. Still, we can play with the line weights a little bit, but at least we get something that starts to look like the overlay of the lines. With the rendering behind. Are you guys able to get that? Or you'll go back and watch the video? And like I said, my plan is to create a couple of tutorials given all of these different steps for these things, so you can kind of go at your own pace and do it. But we can manipulate the image in Photoshop. We could bring it into Illustrator. We could play with the lines, set up the lines. The lines are a little intense. But it should give you the kind of workflow for this. So any questions?
But thank you for showing that. Understanding the steps helped a lot.
And I know it's getting late. I know that I lost you guys at some point too, but I'll create some other tutorials that'll allow you to follow along. But I think it's just nice in terms of the way that just to recap a little bit from tonight, right? Just playing a little bit with the construction planes, and setting the geometry and be able to control some of the dimensions, and then just being able to take your model, work with a solid, do that. If I were doing something more architectural, right, it's just a matter of kind of drawing the plane, starting to extrude things, working with masses. In this case, I just wanted to give you guys a sense about like looking at a kind of space, seeing the light, the way that comes in. You could just as easily cut a plan through this or cut a section, depending on what that is. Be able to look at something from the outside and be able to look at something from the inside.
We'll still put this video up too though, right? So we can kind of fill in the gaps on what we.
Yeah, I'll share it with you guys just as an unlisted thing.
Yeah.
And then over time, what I'll do is, and maybe based, if you go back and watch it and you're like, oh, like, could you expand on something? Or if there was any feedback, I can start to make some smaller tutorials of them. I can also stop sharing so I can see you guys too. What else would help? What would be the next set of tutorials that you guys would want, or the next workshop?
Maybe like applying materials and like how to control that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that can happen with rendering. And then it's also going to be specific to the software too. We are planning to offer a bunch of Unreal Engine, which is a real-time renderer as well, this coming semester. And so you'll be able to take your geometry from Rhino into that and to be able to render it there. So I think we are planning a lot more rendering workshops coming.
Are you guys looking at like Twin Motion or just Unreal or
Twin Motion? Have you used it?
That's a nice program. Yeah, I use it a lot for my residential projects because you can actually build the site really well with it and control waterways and what's vegetated and what's not. So it works really well.
Right. So we're looking at bring together that and some of the game design a little bit within the college and have some of those workshops. And then there's a lot of stuff that's happening with Grasshopper as well too. So, and it's interesting, like Ian, who was here earlier, has like, I was surprised that he was here because he's done a lot with Grasshopper, but you can actually do things with Grasshopper and not actually know how to model in Rhino, and vice versa. And so there's a lot of support and a lot of interest in Grasshopper as well, to be able to make things so that you can change parameters and iterate and try a bunch of different design models quickly.
So are you gonna have like more of these workshops throughout the year?
The plan is to roll out, I think we talked about, and I can't remember if it was for the semester of the year, but probably something like 15 of them this semester, I think.
Okay.
And so, but a range of things. They might be Photoshop and Illustrator and other types of things. Some of them might be student-led from some of the student groups. We might have some people coming from outside to do some of them, but it just feels like there was enough interest. And we also, in a class, maybe you wouldn't do something so specific. So we might like run a 3-hour workshop on, and there's a lot of discussions that we're having, but like sketching with a client. Like this, I was in a meeting and had lunch on Monday with a number of people from AECom, and they're like, oh, we're not seeing people with that kind of ability. And it's like, well, we should run that as a workshop, right? We wouldn't necessarily do that in a class, but if we had a couple of people come and we ran a workshop on like, okay, you're sitting around a table and you have to sketch and you have to communicate something, like that would be a kind of great 3-hour quick hit and run kind of workshop to do. And so the same thing, like setting up a scene, setting lights for a rendering, setting materials for renderings, like each of those might become different workshops. And they're just kind of extracurricular. My guess is they'll be recorded and then people can check them out or can watch them on their own time or be part of the workshop as well. So we're looking, they might be on the weekends. We're running classes all the time. And so it seems like Saturday morning with donuts type of thing would be a great workshop time.
Carl, for the Unreal, are you able to do that at all, like online through or does it all have to be downloaded? I tried to do a workshop and it was a pretty heavy load, downloading all that. And I had to dump a bunch of stuff off the laptop, the university laptop, like SolidWorks went by the wayside, things had to go off in order to.
That's okay.
But to get the software on so that I could do it. So it just was kind of, I'm just thinking ahead.
I haven't actually used it yet, so I don't know. I think I did the same. I downloaded it after we had someone lecture on it last semester, and then I haven't had a chance to play with it.
Yeah, I think I did the gaming one where they were trying to show how we could use it, and then it moved pretty quick. I couldn't keep up with it, but.
That kind of leads to another question. Do you suggest that we learn everything of all of these all of these programs? Because I find that I've got my workflow that I typically use for my job, but it's difficult for me to know which ones to learn and which ones to not learn.
I don't think you have to know all of them. I think we're also experimenting in the art and design program this semester where industrial design tends to use one type of modeling software, transportation designers use another, and game designers use another. We're running it as one class so that we'll teach the key concepts, right? Okay, like we were doing tonight, like here's a construction plane. They all have some version of a construction plane, but they might call it something else. Here's a polygon model, here's a NURBS model, here's this, right? Understanding those key differences are important because the other thing that can happen is you can move from one firm to another and they'll use two different types of software. And so if you understand the basics in the way that they work and the kind of workflow, you should be able to navigate between them. And there's enough stuff too, like, I don't know, I'm constantly doing things within Grasshopper, and I'm constantly like going to YouTube, like, okay, Grasshopper, how to do this, right? And then a short video pops up on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's how I do it. And so you can kind of piece those things together. So you can also drive yourself insane by trying to learn all these things, and then the following year the software changes, right? And so there's a kind of diminishing return on that investment if you're trying to learn all of them all the time and stay current with them and all of that. And so I think what you want to do is make sure, and I don't know if you were the one that, or someone last night that was talking about SketchUp, I think the difference, and the reason why I would caution people, at least from seeing students work with it and other things, is like SketchUp is probably quick to learn, but it kind of plateaus quickly in terms of its capabilities. And so I think I see a lot of students like, well, I'm just going to learn SketchUp. And then there's a resistance to like, oh, I need to get to that next level, but I'm going to like, I know SketchUp, right? And so I think that's why and I know that your power was off last night. For me, there's a whole bunch of reasons why to learn Rhino, which has to do with being able to tie into fabrication. You can render, we can make it parametric with Grasshopper. And so I would learn software that at least there's enough depth there to work with it. And for us, that's been Rhino, and Rhino plays really well in terms of the workflow of being able to like save an Illustrator file, right? Do a rendering, make an STL, do all of these types of things, which is at least why I would promote Rhino with something. Maybe not all firms are using it, but it's also incredibly cheap too, which means it's more likely to be used by a small firm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I was wondering along that lines about this 3ds Max, and I only ask because, you know, I'm looking at job postings all the time, and I don't, you know, like, I mean, I'm a diehard Rhino fan, even though I'm not very good at it. I use it a lot, and I guess they're just different capabilities, but I don't know. I mean, it eliminates me from another opportunity, and I'm wondering just your thoughts on that, you know, as well. You know, it's a little bit more than a SketchUp, right? So it's like,
It tends to be animation. There's some good rendering options for it with 3D Studio Max. But the other thing I would say, like, and even to Nicholas's question, is like, if you are competent within Rhino, like, I wouldn't not apply for the job that says 3D Studio Max. And this is going to sound a little bad and a little cynical, but like, how quickly can they hire you? It's like, oh, you'll start in 2 weeks. Then you watch some tutorials in 3D Studio Max for 2 weeks, right? And get up to speed on something. So I think if you understand the kind of key ways that software works, and then you're committed to doing that thing, it doesn't take long. I think learning the first piece of software will take the most amount of time. Learning the next piece of software is going to be a lot easier.
yeah, I mean, it's Autodesk. So, I mean,
Right.
are there some similarities, you know, in terms of, I don't know, I mean, terminology in some cases. I mean, I see some old AutoCAD stuff that comes into Rhino, you know, like just
Right.
like you're talking, using your left hand and your right hand. I mean, I'm Autodesk before Windows, you know, was around. So,
Right.
you know, right after the stylus times, you know,
Right.
so.
And some of those things haven't changed at all, right? Like, and this is why I say, like, learning
Curves are
AutoCAD.
still there, right?
It's like offset, trim, split, delete, move, copy. You use the same commands over and over again. And then there's tips and tricks. And if you're dating yourself that much and talking about those things, I mean, YouTube has radically changed this too, to be able to search for a command and
Oh, yeah.
figure out how to do something.
Well, I don't use Autodesk anymore, but, you know, I'm just saying, you know, like,
Yeah.
stuff sticks with you, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just by default, it's like you're speaking a language and you go and all of a sudden you use another language because it's there and you don't even know where it comes from, you know, but.
And that's the other amazing thing with Rhino, realizing that I've been working with it for 20 years, for good and actually this is like a positive thing. At first I thought it was a negative thing. The interface hasn't changed that much in 20 years. there's a whole bunch of new tools, there's new capabilities, there's a new renderer that's in there, there's other types of things, but there's still the command bar on the top, there's the layers on the right, there's icons on the left, you can still type with the keys. And that's a pretty amazing thing too. Other software will come and go, but it's been really stable. And I think the other thing that they've done well is opened up things, and there's all the plugins and everything that's happened with Grasshopper has kind of, it's almost like it's a new piece of software, but it's built on top of Rhino.
Yeah, I think when you get a chance to play with this inside Revit though, you're gonna, it's like finally Revit 2 is doing something different, right? I mean, it's
Yep.
making that leap, and they're starting to play together, and you can control all of Revit in theory by doing the Rhino stuff. I don't know how to do it all yet, but I'm just saying it's like I'm really excited about it. And I don't know, I would like more than just Zuby's, little boot camp too, because I can
Yep.
see there's going to be a lot that you can do with the 2 interface, at this
Yeah, I
point.
think Eric Ward's been playing a lot with it, and it's actually a huge departure for Autodesk. They've never played well with others, and Rhino has always played well with others. And so now we see Revit being able to incorporate Rhino, which is I don't know, it's like a David and Goliath story in terms of software.
Can I go back to Rhino for a second? Do you have time?
Yeah. You want to share
Okay.
your screen? Share your
Yeah,
screen.
sure. Just where I got stuck.
Yeah, because it helps me putting these tutorials together too.
Okay, so can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so I set my C-plane perpendicular to the curve, but now, so to draw the second curve, it should be drawing on this C-plane, correct? This was the top part of our vessel.
Yeah. But you're in the front view. And so what I would tend to do is to work. It also looks like your curve is curved. And this is when it's useful to be looking at all 3 views. Your curve is curved in plan and it's curved in elevation, which means it's doubly curved, which is okay. It's not gonna ruin anything for this. But what I might do is, rather than work in your front view of setting that, is to first hit escape a couple times. There you go. And then look in your perspective view and rotate that a little bit. And let's see that curve up there. So what I would do is I would change now with the perspective view set, now I would change the C-plane up there.
So in perspective, C-plane, then set plane.
Yep. And then hit enter.
Okay.
And so now as you rotate around, and you can even just make your perspective view full screen by double clicking perspective.
Okay.
And now if you orbit around a little bit, I think it's at the end. It seems like it got a little jiggly as you're replacing it. But now you should, that looks pretty good. Maybe try it again. Just set the C-plane perpendicular to the curve again. Yep. Select the curve. And you can set it anywhere along there, but for that first one, you just want to make sure you set it to the end. Yeah, and that's okay. So that looks good. Now, if you draw a shape, draw one of those like the control point curve on there. As long as it doesn't snap to anything else, it should be flat on
there we
that
go.
surface. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Okay.
But it's big, but you can get a sense for it. I think there's also, for me, a little bit of delay maybe between what you're drawing and what I'm seeing. But what you'll start to get used to, and this is the way that I work, I'm always in the perspective view, like full screen, and I'm constantly orbiting and spinning it around. So because it's three-dimensional, like things might look a certain way when you only look from one view, but if you keep kind of spinning it, you start to get a sense for it. And so it's like zooming in and zooming out. And I didn't show you guys, there's also a thing, a space mouse that you can use, that's your left hand, where you can kind of zoom in and out and orbit all at the same time. It's like a different level of control. And so when you're really getting into modeling, you're kind of constantly spinning around the thing, making sure that your points and your surfaces and your objects are in the right place.
Okay, thanks.
What is Space Mouse? I don't know if I know that. Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about some like click shift or something like that.
No, it's like a little puck, and it allows you to push in, out, and orbit all at the same time. And so it's a really seamless way of like looking
I
at
see it
something.
on like the YouTube tutorial where,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'll share the recording with everybody. Let me know if there's any feedback or any parts that you'd like expanded or anything like that. Philip Plowright, I believe, shared a survey with all the students about what you guys wanted to see for tutorials. And so if you haven't filled that out and you have a better sense now, I think it's still open. We're watching the responses come in on that. And yeah, use Rhino. If you run into trouble, let me know. I'll help you.
All right. Great. Thanks so much.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Carl.
All
Thanks.
right. Best of luck, everybody. And I guess we'll see you in class soon. Too soon, but we'll see you soon.
Have a good
All right,
night.
everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.